Let's say a professing Christian cracks open their devotional for the day, armed with their question, does God want me to buy a new house? And they begin to read. And the first verse that they come across is Psalm 51, verse 18, which reads,
In your good pleasure make Zion prosper, build up the walls of Jerusalem.
Well, it's not uncommon to next hear them running down the hall shouting, oh my goodness, honey, come here quick. God spoke to me about building our own home from scratch. Now, meanwhile, the husband is unemployed. They'd have to go into massive debt in order to get the house that they want. And they'd have to do it all against every biblical moral principle that the Bible teaches. But none of that seems to deter such Christians from believing that God spoke to them through that verse in Psalm 51. Do you see the problem? By playing those kinds of carnival games with Scripture, insincere readers of the Bible can effectively avoid the moral ramifications of Scripture and still justify to themselves that they're participating in a quote-unquote relationship with God, when in fact, all of that is little more than fantasy and self-delusion. That is not how to determine God's will regarding the purchase of a home or any other decision for that matter. If you want to know the truth about the decisions and opportunities and problems of life, and you're serious, not just curious, then you'll have to search the Scriptures. Look for the passages that directly apply to the moral issue in question and apply good, solid biblical hermeneutics to any and all requests for information that you might have for God. And then, when you rightly and accurately determine what God's standard is on any particular moral issue, your job as a Christian is to apply that to your circumstances. In other words, you won't be able to cheat at it and just make up your own answers by misinterpreting the first words that you read. You'll actually have to look for God's answers and accept and apply His moral standards as they are recorded in Holy Scripture. Which means in the case of the illustration that we've been using, you'd be far better served purchasing a topical study guide like one of the ones listed on the screen. And if your goal is to find out what God's will is on stewardship and money and debt, you would use the topical study guide to look up every verse or passage or command on that subject, and then the idea would be to do a thorough study on each passage using good, solid biblical rules of interpretation. And once you discover what the moral guidelines actually are, well, you could use those moral guidelines as the boundary lines, if you will, to stay within. And as long as you stay within those boundary lines, you'd have the opportunity to do whatever you'd like and whatever would most please God as providential circumstances allow. And of this you can be sure. If you follow that approach to getting your questions answered from Scripture, you will never regret the decisions and conclusions that you come to. But if you play the fortune cookie Bible verse game, who knows where you'll end up. By randomly plucking verses out of context and then assigning random meanings to them, you'll find yourself so far outside of God's will before you know it that it may take months or years to even figure out that you are outside of God's will. So the key is, Scripture can only help you if you interpret it properly.